Hello, this is the Doctor. Can you hear me?
And this is the Doctor as well.
And also the Doctor. It's very confusing. Keep it straight in your head. Anyway, subscribe
to Type 40.
Wake up, Adley. It's Christmas time for Type 40 Live continues. I doubt this will make for a particularly silent night, though. Here on the live stream Doctor Who magazine show, we're back again in real time on Rumble, X, YouTube, and on Facebook too. Come all ye faithful fellow friends, fans, and companions of the world's longest-running, best-loved sci-fi and fantasy series, Doctor Who. Yeah, enough of the present. I think time to skip back through the past, if they let us, if modern technology lets us, that is, if we can escape into that new presentation that we've just been served in the last couple of hours. Can't wait to hear what you've got to say about all of that. We're on our way to Christmas Day, of course, and the main event, is it? I don't know. Was that the main event, or is this the main event? The jury is out. That's on Christmas Day, shooting out in Doctor Who Joy to the World at 5:10. But for now, we remain virtually snowed in, waiting on that. Stop laughing at the back. Yes, the BBC has served us a starter course again, which some have definitely been anticipating more than the main course. The classic series of Doctor Who is more alive than ever, and some of it is more colourful than ever too. At Type 40 Live, we bring you takes that are hotter than a tray full of Nardol's mince pies. Isn't that right? So let's get stuck into it now.
How big is it? Huge.
It's huge. I can't get it in.
Wasn't long enough.
It was too big for me.
So that's Mary's verdict there. What have we got to say about it? I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. Welcome back to Type 40 Live on this monumental evening, everybody. Merry Christmas. Was that? And yes, what next? Whatever next? Look, if you're there in the Type 40 Facebook group, please remember to hit the little blue link right away, because if you don't, we won't find out who you are through the wonders of Facebook and StreamYard all collaborating together. No, there's no little white boxes that can be sent here. You have to do it through the blue link. So you do that. Everybody across YouTube, Rumble, and X, of course, keep watching and get your opinions into via the comments section a little later on. Okay, so I have... what have I been doing? Yes, so here we are. This is where it all... Yeah. In the console room. So I've snatched away some troops already from the trenches of the culture war to join me again here. How could we not be here when something so monumental has premiered? So expect some pet peeves, some bouquets, some cold shoulders, and maybe some warm fronts all on the way. We'll find out, I suppose, when I bring them in and fill up the console room. Who is first? We have, oh yes, look at this, bathed in the kind of light that we saw the Time Lords in a moment ago. Anthony Wayne are back on the show.
Hello, how you doing, Dan?
How are
Hello,
you?
mate. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Dan, I normally go to bed about 7:30, so this is a massive jump to still be awake at 11 o'clock. But how could I miss the opportunity of being on Type 40 Live and talking about the war games that we've just seen?
Oh, well, I'm glad you said yes. And we took a little bit of wrangling, didn't it? But we got you to say yes in the end. And now that we've got you, we can't let you go for a little while. Yes, it's the war games in colour too that we've just been served on BBC4 this evening. And we have more people to bring in as well from across the dimensions and across actual time zones too. First of all, and looking very festive as well, I'm happy to say, it's our all-American mate, Mr. Gary Akers, the Retro Doc.
Ho, ho, ho!
Ho, ho, ho!
Everybody, coming to you from the California time zone.
So given the fact that it is so much later...
Which is just south of the 1917 zone.
I like it. So given the fact that it's so much later for us than we're usually on, Gary, what time roughly is it there for you in your part of the world, Florida?
2:50 in the afternoon.
Oh, see, that's a nice, proper, sensible time.
The light still behind me.
A sensible time to be live streaming, I think. I'm glad you could make it, Gary, through the wonders of technology. Can't wait to hear what you've got to say as well. And finally, making up our panel, I'm happy to say that he's back too. He's beaten his own Time Lords and Gremlins to triumph over technology once more. Merry Christmas. Welcome back, John Yulden. Sort of. No, they've muted him.
Muting him.
They've taken away his powers of speech, not the secret of the TARDIS, the secret of the voice. With any luck, we'll get something out of John in a couple of minutes. I think his mic needs to be connected properly. Okay, so this is where we've been all the way back in 1969, but not looking quite like that, looking a touch more colourful for the war games in colour. Patrick Troughton's Doctor, of course, the second Doctor. For a time he was known, wasn't he, Anthony, as the Forgotten Doctor? Do you remember that way back in the 80s?
Yeah, I do, Dan, actually. And, and seeing Patrick Troughton so close to Christmas and in colour, it kind of there was something exciting about it. I don't want to go too far too fast, but there was something exciting about it. And actually, when I think about Doctor Who, and you talk about this, this notion of forgotten Doctor, when I grew up, I was Tom Baker. I'd seen lots of Tom Baker. I'd grown up with Tom Baker, and then John Pertwee was kind of somewhere in the background there. But yeah, with regards to Patrick Troughton, he was sort of lost in the middle of that kind of William Hartnell, John Pertwee, Tom Baker time for me, because I'd never seen any of these go out live. So he was a bit of an enigma. And I always used to find watching those black and white ones when they used to be released on video. I always used to find that, that they were not cheap looking, but they were a little bit claustrophobic, a little bit. It was something I wasn't really used to, and as I grew to watch them, I grew to love them, I guess. So yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? I mean, nothing's forgotten for fans of any sort of big genre culty show, is it, Gary? Whichever part of the world that you're from, we latch onto this stuff, and we latch on hard now. And of course, now everything's so accessible all the time in multiple forms. So the idea that something and someone in this particular lineage could be forgotten, it's ridiculous, isn't it, when we reflect?
Well, especially when, for me, for the longest time, my experience of the Second Doctor was through the Target books. Because before the videos start coming out, and even when the VHSs came out, I think we were limited to like 5 stories. And now when you think about it, between the DVDs, between all of the animations that have come out, between the special editions, I think there's only 3 out of all of his stories that aren't represented yet.
Is that right?
Animations, whatever. And so finally, we have the chance, for the most part, to rediscover this glorious Doctor.
In full. Yeah, I mean, it is the case, isn't it, John, that you can rewatch what exists in strictest terms of the Troughton era. You know, if you're a keen binge watcher, you can get it done in a week and a half. Can't you? That's the sad, that's the sad part of it. But in some ways, I do find that there's an intensity to that. You know, I'm a pretty optimistic kind of bloke, and the intensity of that, I choose to take something positive from it, so that by the time he does have to say goodbye to Jamie and Zoe, and it's never not been a stinger, that it's never not hurt. By the time we get there, you know, we do feel, I think it's because Patrick Troughton was such an incredible character actor. I think it's entirely down to him, to his perseverance in the part, him pushing the boundaries with it, and really propelling it into the future, I suppose, sort of setting a new standard for what the part could be going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I adore Pat beyond belief. I mean, again, many people over the years have said, look, you know, if Pat hadn't have made it a smash when he took it on, it probably would have ended, you know, and just seeing him in this, I mean, War Games is a favourite of mine. I absolutely adore War Games.
I think it's a favourite of a lot of people's. Whether they hold Patrick Troughton himself particularly aloft, I think a great many people feel that way.
Yeah, and I just like how it builds throughout the story, and then you get the ending with the Time Lords. It's superb. It really is. I love it. You know, it's that slow build, John. You know, because people say, in fact, I think one of the writers said that it's like 6 episodes too long, Gary. But I've never subscribed to that point of view at all. I like, just as John said, I like that slow kind of steady build, that impending sense of doom, and that it doesn't matter how much he sort of flaps his arms and his coattails around, that he's not going to get away this time.
Well, I mean, having never seen Dalek Master Plan, this to me is like the epic of all Doctor Who epics. And I think they had to do the slow build in order to get to the point where the Doctor says, I can't do this by myself. The only way that this is going to get fixed is to do the one thing he never promised to do. So the threat has to be pretty massive for that to happen. And for us to see that needs to take place over a longer than normal amount of episodes.
I think I was also going to say about the War Games and why I adore it, and I quote my mate Paul, but he says, you know, the War Games is a story where, although I do it, it's not one to binge. It's one where you watch maybe an episode or two and then pick it up in a few days' time. That's what's so great about the War Games.
Wise words, Paul.
Yeah, you crafty sod. But you know, it's a superb story, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say about this one, and the and the people in the chat.
Slowly, catchy monkey. Yes, for once, it's not all about you, Sunshine. No, but we'll get to you later in the week, I don't doubt, on the iPlayer. Maybe, I don't know. But there for now, this is Type 40 Live on Rumble X, YouTube, and on Facebook too, talking the War Games in colour. In a moment. Before we get there, though, I want to remind you of what we've been up to recently. So, yes, we didn't dematerialise this Christmas. We had our Christmas party a couple of weeks ago. That was a lot of fun. The usual kind of raucous behaviour. There was lots of nostalgia and news and stupid jokes and fantastic fan art. That's still there for you to discover or rediscover. If you were sort of semi-drunk by about halfway through, a lot of our punters do partake in a tipple here or there, and I can't say I blame you. So there's that, and there's our Type 40 Live Christmas quiz too, with special quizmaster Stephen Noonan and our all-star panel Mark Elstob, Chris Walker-Thompson, and Simon Horton and Shah, with regular appearances and input from the fabulous Toby Haydock. So that's the Christmas content so far up here on the channel for you to enjoy as you will there, with maybe a mince pie or two thrown into the mix as well. But yeah, we're going to waste no more time. Let's get stuck into it. The words of the great man himself there, Patrick Troughton's fabulously lined and expressive face that so many of us that have come along to the show years afterwards have come to love. Every single wrinkle and every single line, and I've always loved every single minute of the War Games. So the idea that they could get into that and remove so much of it for this new presentation, it was a tough sell. It really was. But, you know, here we are, for better or for worse. I can't wait to hear what everybody's got to say.
Can we have a 10-part episode about that, please?
Yeah, when they do Planet of the Spiders, that'll be the new last scene in that
one. You can have that one for free, Ben. Okay, so yes, they've done it. We got a shock announcement, didn't we, on Doctor Who Day? Just a few short weeks ago, that was. The revelation that a further classic Doctor Who story was to be given the in-colour treatment. And yes, it's the War Games seminal 10-part epic from the final black and white season in 1969 on BBC One way back then, but up on BBC 4 this time, fancy new digital BBC channel, on December the 23rd, 2024, in the run-up to Christmas, of course, a brand new Christmas present, new edition of this classic story, The War Games, in colour, everybody. So yeah, this story was, of course, the work of writers Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dix, two absolute masters. They'd worked together over a 2 or 3 year period, hadn't they, on scripts for The Avengers, I think it was. Is that right, Anthony? I know that they knew one another, weren't they? They were familiars. Yeah. So coming together, I think Terence... The story was a kind of make, do, and mend thing, wasn't it? So the original 10 parts. So it wasn't always meant to be 10 parts and so long. But it was those two writers coming together. They sort of fashioned it into something that would be fit for purpose, I suppose. Because necessity often being the mother of invention when it came to Doctor Who. These guys, these two names that we see in great big letters, even on this new edition of Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dix, they really were titans, weren't they, Anthony?
Absolutely, and as we've all said already, you know, this was, you know, is a classic Doctor Who. You know, it's like the equivalent of Dalek Master Plan. It's epic in length, isn't it? It's like Trial of a Time Lord. It goes on and on. It keeps on giving. But when you see the names Terence Dix and Malcolm Hulke, you know, given what they go on to do later on in Doctor Who, yeah, you've got two titan names. I was going to add, Dan, the first time I ever saw War Games was on a clip show in about 1985-86. It was called Windmill, I think.
Me too.
And they used to do little clips on the BBC of BBC programs. And the first time I ever saw anything of War Games was the bit where Troughton and Jamie and Zoe are going. That's the bit, Dan, going to the TARDIS to escape. And I was mesmerized by that clip because in many ways it was the first, apart from the Crotons in the Five Faces of Doctor Who, it was going to be my first engagement, I think, with black and white Doctor Who. I'd seen Patrick Troughton in the Two Doctors the kind of months or the year before, but this was the first time, and it looked really good, but the quality was really ropey. The picture quality was really ropey. Anyway, I digress. That's not your question. So, but anyway, when you see the names Terence Dix and Malcolm Hulke, you think of some really great Doctor Who.
Epic, and these guys, I mean, obviously they would both go on to write more for the series. But in some respects, they're considered to be so masters of their craft, I suppose you could say. They never wasted a single line, John. You know, Malcolm Hulke wrote a book on screenwriting, didn't he? The idea that anyone, for any reason at all, could go back to their work, to his work, remove so much of it, is sacrilege to some. But there's a very specific remit behind these productions, isn't there? Therefore, a specific audience too, on a brand new channel, all these years later. I think that the idea is simply in the same way that it would be to make a new movie version of a classic story. The story is so strong that it should bear up. If we believe it to be as strong as we say it is, then it should bear up to some amount of reworking. But it's a very sweet spot, isn't it? And when the same team did this to the Daleks, the second story, the 7-part Dalek story, just over a year ago, you know, results were mixed, weren't they? So people were a little tense about them now approaching a 10-part story, another 3 episodes, and yet here we are. We've seen it. So let's come to you first. War Games in Colour, as premiered this evening on BBC4 there with the Radio Times listing, the customary Radio Times listing. How nervous were you, John, when the credits, the pre-credit sequence started to roll on this?
Well, put it this way, my best friend Jack Daniels was very close to coming out. So yeah, he was keeping me company.
So you feared the worst.
Yeah, I did. And what was it? All of my predictions, bar one, came true.
Okay.
And
have you got a bingo card?
I know I should start doing the lottery, shouldn't I? Really, but
I just want to know how much of the bottle is left.
Well, there's not much left at all, mate. I'm getting Uber to deliver another one. Okay. And I think what you were saying a minute ago, Dan, for me, Malcolm Hulke, Terrence Dicks, Robert Holmes, they're the trio of excellence for me for Doctor Who. And you've got to have balls of steel to basically go, right, I'm going to cut this one up and edit it, and we're going to release it, doing it our way. And my view on it is the colorization is absolutely sensational. Yeah. I cannot. Those technicians are absolute geniuses, and I hope they go on to do bigger and better things because they are great. But for me, I didn't enjoy this at all. I'm loyal to the original. I've said that before, but I just felt.
Isn't it a given that we're all, particularly us guys,
it is,
have lived with, that we're all loyal to the original? Isn't that something we have to kind of put aside, though?
But I think it's important to be out in the open. I've said this before. Understandably, I am going to have a bias because of how much I love the original. But watching this one, though, I did feel it felt disjointed with the edits. There were bits where it jumped, and it's like, oh, they're having a conversation with so-and-so, but they've cut out that bit of the episode.
So you were very, very conscious of what was missing rather than being swept away. Was. Gotcha.
And I think also there's, in the original, there's lovely little character moments, and a lot of those were sort of missing. And the thing that I struggled with as well, I don't know if you guys struggled with it, but there were times when the audio, the music tracks, I think they could have just toned it down a little bit, because when I was trying to hear them speak, I couldn't actually hear what they were saying because the music track was too loud.
We know what it reminded me of, and I had this problem. Yeah. I did notice that this time it was nowhere near as bad as it was in the latter third. This is in my opinion. I had the same problem with the Daleks in colour, specifically the last third of that presentation last year, Gary. To me, it's like when the music comes in at about 50 minutes in, it's like when you're on your PC and you've got a few windows open and you're looking at one window and you can hear some music and you think, where's that music coming from? And it turns out it's coming from another window that you've accidentally left open. It's like I've got another window open somewhere that's drowning out the dialogue on what I'm trying to watch. I got that a couple of times, particularly in a conversation between the War Chief and the Doctor, quite late in the episode, a really important character speech. So it was present in this, but I felt it nowhere near the amount that I felt it drowned out the Daleks last year. So for me, they just about, Ben, you just about got away with it this time, but it was still too much, and I think, Mark, the volume was still a little too much there on the music too. Are you following me, Gary? You see where I'm coming from with that?
I agree with you both, and I do. There were a couple of times where I thought, tone it down a little. Especially during the confrontation scene you talk about. At the risk of alienating my good friend John, I have to say that with the exception of like 2 seconds in this one, I was utterly captivated throughout.
Like stuff, yeah.
Ben, he's canceling me right now as we speak. No, I thought that it's been a while. I've seen War Games obviously a few times, but it's been a while since the last time I actually sat down with it. So I wasn't in the mode of watching it going, okay, they skipped that. I intentionally tried to just take it as another interpretation of the story and see if I could follow this interpretation. And it was almost, I think, inevitable that they do some of the jump cuts and dialogue overlays with new scenes in order to carry you throughout. But I was totally fine with it. I mean, having seen a lot of the 60s Bond movies that were edited by Peter Hunt, that was his way to go with the jump cuts and the speeding up.
Yeah, I
and
like
everything.
that.
So I was used to that. I was captivated by the colorization, which, as John said, was great. I love all the red walls in the base. I love
the command center.
The psychedelic room, and I was flashing on the 1960s version of Casino Royale with all the weird loopy walls and everything. And because
it's always had that quality, isn't it? That of the mid 60s, it's always had a little stylistically in common with Patrick McGowan's Prisoner and things very much of that particular 67 to 69, that sweet spot.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say right now is that as much as I was looking forward to seeing Zoe in her coat at the beginning, seeing Wendy Padbury as Zoe in the oversized coat that she disguises herself with, that's my new favorite moment in Doctor Who.
Bless her.
I love seeing her, bundled up in that oversized coat.
I have to agree with you about the colorization. I felt this was, and I thought they did a fantastic job on the last one, but for me this was not just a step up, I think it was probably 3 or 4 steps up from what was achieved with the Daleks in colour, enough to captivate me. And I had the same experience as you, Gary. I felt the presentation of this and the pre-credits sequence as well. Not only had I not noticed that we hadn't had the credits yet, starting with that brand new effect to sort of sweep us into the story, I felt it really did work and kind of sold me on a new version of an old story, and I got completely swept away in a way that I regret that John wasn't. How about you, Anthony?
And I've got to say a special note to the BBC color rotating globe.
That was lovely.
How that diffuses into the actual Earth. I thought, holy cow, we're in for something.
Gary, that was the way that old CRTs, when they used to sort of fade out, they used to bleach out, didn't they? From one sort of credit sequence into a continuity announcement, Anthony. Are you old enough to remember that, Anthony?
Not old enough, no. I'm much younger, Dan. I just wanted to jump in about the music first of all, because it's a good point, Dan. And the Dalek music for me is your view. It was too loud. It was too
snapped
noisy.
Me right out of it.
Yeah, I've tried to rewatch the Daleks in colour recently in preparation for the War Games in colour, and it is just a noise blast, to the point where all you can hear is the music and you can't hear the dialogue, and you get lost.
And Anthony, some of the music in the Daleks one is kind of inappropriate with a small I.
Yeah,
it's conspicuous, whereas I felt that the music in this was a lot more belonging to the time.
Yes, I agree, and I wasn't so affected by the music in this one as I was in the Daleks. There was a couple of musical stings that I'll bring up. The master theme from Terror of the Autons.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
And there were two musical stings from Sound of the Drums and The Last of the Time Lords to kind of.
That's a bit cheeky. Okay.
Yeah. So there was
I didn't catch that.
There was a lot of music being used that was true to the War Games, but also true to the Master. And I don't quite know what they were trying where they were taking us with that.
This is exactly what I agree with you, Auntie. I mean, jumping into it, and if I can talk about it now, that really irked me as well when they did like The Last of the Time Lords. They did the Master music for the War Chief, and I was like, the War Chief is not the Master, okay? But it's kind of like, it's fitting in with their narratives again. And there's things that they did in this, and I predicted they would attempt to do stuff like this. And it's like,
because they didn't do that. They didn't do that and focus on that dramatically. And if I'd have heard that music, I'd feel exactly the same way as you, John.
Yeah, and also, mate, I think when the War Chief gets killed at the end of it, and they take the body off and the body's at the side, they do a little subtle regeneration energy noise.
I did hear that. Yeah,
and I was like, for crying out loud. And again,
yeah, just leave it. Yeah,
exactly, mate. And I think, look, if they had done this and gone right, but we're going to keep it traditional to what it was, fine, got no problem with it. But what they tend to always do, and I predicted this would happen, is they add elements in from modern day to try and say, yeah, my view on it is it's like a 5-year-old who's basically got a colouring book and is going, you never guess what I'm going to do now. You never guess what I'm going to put on the screen.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Obviously, that's the worst excess of it, isn't it? When you talk about the very modern day. But I even resist the idea that any kind of embellishment, really, of kind of received fan wisdom, Gary, or headcanon that are sort of gathered like a giant snowball over the decades, that we've all added substance and momentum to, but that should kind of still be left in the realms of the fandom, and I feel not be incorporated into the main show. I think there's no need for it. I think the material is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a purist, like the rest of you. And I've got to say in this one that when I first heard the master theme, and I missed the Regeneration music that John's referring to. I missed that later. When I first heard that was my first kind of like jaw drop watching this. Not because I was offended by it, but I thought, really? Okay, because obviously the theory that the war chief could be the master has been a fan theory that's been around for I don't know how many
decades. As long as I've been a Doctor Who fan, Anthony. So as long as I've been part of organised Doctor Who fandom, right. Gary.
And so I got to say, in this one, during the confrontation scene, in this one, I was flashing to the similar scene in a couple seasons later in Colony in Space, where the Master is trying to persuade the Doctor to join him, and I thought, also written by Malcolm Hulke, and I thought, wow, okay. There's a lot of parallels between this scene and that one. And I thought, honestly, I was fine with this because they're not saying the war chief is the master. They're dropping it. They're
categorically.
By dropping the music to, that's
them saying
fine.
The war chief is the master.
Yeah, and I mean,
obviously the casual viewers, guys, won't have.
Yes.
If I didn't clock the music, casual viewers won't have. But there are far fewer casual viewers watching something like this, a production like this, on a minority channel such as that, at this time in the evening, than there would be for the something as part of the main show.
I surprised myself with the fact that I was okay with it. Maybe because I was still caught up in the presentation of this story. Well, I thought, okay,
a great story is a great story, Gary. I mean,
to give you guys an example, the Jack Daniels bottle was probably 3/4 full at that point, and then it suddenly went to almost empty.
That's when John stopped using the glass and just started chugging the bottle.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, I had a really good time with this. I felt it sort of breezed by, Anthony. I think I looked at my phone to clock the time once. But to be fair, I think that was largely because I knew I got to do this live stream afterwards. For the most part, certainly the first 40 minutes, it never even dawned on me. And apart from a couple of noticing, that's where the cliffhanger to episode 4 is. That's where. Apart from a couple of times of that, the spell really did work with me. And there's something about, and although I did feel that in presenting in the balance of material that was presented here, which was far more the material that is a kind of in a more sci-fi kind of environment, rather than the stuff that's sort of outdoors and with different sort of troops from different time periods. So we lose that kind of balance. And I feel with that, we also lose that sprawling epic feel that the original had. But what we do get in return is a kind of high-ish concept chunk of 60s sci-fi with some great character moments, some cool ideas, a deepening of the Doctor Who lore, and some fantastic visuals.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. And I kind of went into this in the same way that you guys have done. I was expecting this to be repackaged in something new, and I was going to go into this with the story in its own merit. And I was all right for about the first 30 to 40 minutes, and then I started to lose the narrative a little bit, maybe because I was so familiar.
There was a moment where I lost a bit of the plot. Yeah,
I agree, and
only once though. Only once. I lost it several times during the Daleks.
Yeah, we were darting around, and because you know the original source material so well, I guess, it kind of fills the gaps. But there was one point in my open-mindedness going into the narrative that we were jumping around all over the place at one point, which is going back to what we said many shows ago, is that how were you going to contain these or reduce these 10 episodes down into an hour and a half? It was going to be no mean feat. But I did lose the narrative about 40 minutes in when we were back and forth. Maybe
that's why I looked at my clock the time, because that was around the same clock.
The part of the original story, where Jamie starts gathering allies like Panchovia, et cetera, we're missing the meetings of all of that, and now it's just they're there. And I think that something like that was always going to be a casualty of the running time.
I think for me, one thing that, I don't know about you guys, but one thing that did irk me a bit was when you get to the final bit, on Gallifrey, and it was like, guess what, everybody, we're on Gallifrey. Let's show you an exterior shot of Gallifrey and the Citadel. Then they jump back to it, back to interior, and then they go, you remember Gallifrey? Well, if you didn't remember that we're on Gallifrey, we're going to show you another 3 exterior shots of Gallifrey in the Citadel. And it's like,
funny you mention that, John, because in my head, and I don't know if it's something that I decided through watching the War Games initially so many times, or if it's more received fan wisdom or stuff that's been embellished, I got it into my head that kind of like the trial of a Time Lord taking place in a space station, that the Doctor's trial in this also hadn't happened on Gallifrey either. So I was quite surprised by that. It didn't put me off as such, but it just made it seem that little bit smaller.
Yeah. And I mean, that final episode I adore, and I always adored the fact of, throughout it turning up in an unearthly child, the TARDIS is this almost safe zone, that you're safe when you're inside the TARDIS. And I love the fact where they had in the original version, you've got the bit where the water's leaking into the TARDIS, and that was sort of taken out of it as well. And I think that those bits, those are really nicely done in the original, that I just think that they show the power before you get to them of the Time Lords of, you're not even safe in the TARDIS. This is how powerful they are.
Go and get you.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, John, that, when you're talking about the Time Lords, and it's Trevor Martin, there he is there in that picture. I thought his performance in colour stood out a little bit more than it did in black and white. I thought it was a little bit more terrifying. I don't know why. Is it the purple lighting that I've gone for tonight? Or is it his eyes? What was it?
I love the yellow eyes. Oh, great. And we got Chancellor Goth there.
Yeah,
with his Axos hair.
It's Boris Johnson hair in colour.
It's John Pertwee hair.
Some of the sets look spectacular, look fairly wild, I think, and obviously the choices of colours for some of the outfits too. Some of them are how I'd imagine them to be, others weren't. And there are colour photos that exist from this story, so we do know how some of it looked, don't we? Sets and costumes, but not all of it by a long chalk. We've got a set of images here, which I think have been around for some time, that come from the original. Yeah, so we've got these are just some images here. These aren't from the recolorization, but these are colour photographs that actually exist. So you can see they've obviously looked at these very, very closely to match what we saw this evening with how it looked in the studio. And these sets, I mean, they would have looked incredible. Simon Horton's of the belief that they always wanted to make the show in colour. That's how he converted me to the idea that colorization was viable and appropriate. And in this, if the pictures that we see just for this story are anything to go by, I'd say they sort of back it up.
Yeah.
Beautifully balanced.
I think all of that again. I've got so much praise for, and the people that have done it, I will watch their futures with great interest and what they go on to, because it's superb. You cannot fault colorization of it at all. My criticism is purely about the editing of it. That's it. You know,
I'm going to say I'm not sensing any real bitterness from you, John, or any anger or spite or anything like that. It's very frank.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not somebody that will hate on the people that have done this, because quite frankly, they're far more talented than I am. But from me as a viewer, it took me out of it. And, you know, I suspected that would be the case. And you're right, Dan, what you said before. This was miles better than the Daleks, you know, but I still think that they still are trying to figure out how they edit it. Because like you said, Anthony,
it's still a learning curve.
If you're going from 10 episodes down to, you know, 90 minutes, you know, you're going to lose some special moments.
Yeah, you're basically left with 40% of the original runtime.
Yeah.
And if we lost moments with like Patrick from EastEnders, for example, and David Troughton, I think he was gone entirely. If we lose moments with characters like them, then the trade-off is that characters like the War Chief, they actually come out of it quite well. I think anybody who hasn't seen the story before, or not for a while, or has maybe watched a lot of New Who and seen this for the first time, I think will be really stimulated by this character. This is why the idea that he has to be the Master, has to be an early incarnation of the Master, to me that's completely unnecessary. He's a fascinating character in his own right. I think it really cheapens him, Anthony. I mean, but Edward Brayshaw's performance in this, it survives pretty much intact, doesn't it? And so the bringing together of him with Troughton, it shows that they were, as actors, they were perfectly matched. And if anything, that character probably isn't talked about enough. So if we think about that which we may have lost, and the people whose performances are not part of it barely at all, there is a clear focus in this. And I think that, considering the remit, condense a 10-episode classic Doctor Who story down to 90 minutes, I think actually the choices made were largely pretty sensitive.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dan, about Edward Brayshaw, you know, as the War Chief. You know, I think that's the moment where I lost it. But, you know, when the Master's theme was put over the top of him,
that broke the spell.
He was the Master. It took away the value of that actor portraying that character, because now we've just got to believe that he's, you know, they were leading us to believe he was the Master. But actually, the performance of the War Chief by Edward Brayshaw is really, I mean, there's some really good performances in this. I mean, maybe not so much James Bree, perhaps, but Philip Maddock's performance,
extraordinary,
is stunning, isn't it? He is truly terrifying. Terrifying.
He's so cold, isn't he? He's such a nasty little man.
Terrifying in black and white, terrifying still in colour. And I think the performances here, so James Savile as Carstairs as well, and Jane Sherwin as Lady Jennifer, I think there's some really good performances in this,
exquisite,
which still stand up in colour, which was a really good part of this evening, just being able to revisit some of those.
And Anthony, some of the shots as well. I mean, there was some footage early on in the trenches where you could see the lighting wasn't so great, and the colorizers guys were perhaps struggling a little to bring it to life. But I think it was more than made up for by some of the close-up shots later on of people like Carstairs, where you could see where the actor had missed shaving.
And when Jamie meets the red coat, you know, you can almost see the black line between his face and his wig, you know.
Oh, really? I didn't catch that.
Red coat wig. And there's kind of a line here. And you I think the colour kind of draws you into it. There's the bit when they go to the jail, the prison, where Jamie is. And then the door opens and you can see the cloth behind the door to imply the outside. And that's more noticeable in colour. And I think sometimes in black and white, those little details which are really good get lost. So it's nice to see in colour that you can start to pick out some things.
There was some fabulous special effects work in this. Virtually every time we saw a TARDIS or a Sidrat on screen, they looked beautiful and charming, just like little models, Gary, which is kind of how I want things to be. But I think that for all that I didn't like about those trappings, and the thing about Gallifrey that John mentioned, then what I got back in return was that gorgeous kind of Jerry Anderson style model
Absolutely.
of the outside of the base.
Yes. I'm
with the
so
Viking
glad they
ships.
kept. I'm so glad they kept going back to that a couple, 3 times, and I'll have to go back and watch it. But it seems like they were each time they went back, and I think it was 3 or 4 times. It was from a different angle where you had like biplanes flying over at one point, like on the left-hand side.
Yeah, and there was Viking ships sailing down the river.
And at one point there was like a car driving
Gorgeous.
out of the.
Very nice.
One of it. So
Character options playset, please.
There you go. So it wasn't like a stock shot that they kept going back to. They tried to distinguish it little by little each time.
It was really good to see that establishing shot of the war game.
Yeah.
And I take your point, John. There was at one point there was an aeroplane going over and all of that. But I actually found it a bit irksome after a while. It was like, oh, not that bloody shot again. We've had that one at least 4 times. Why are we having it again?
Oh, you're so greedy, you guys.
It's almost like
It's
almost like, oh well, no, we've paid for this, so we got to get our money's worth. We'll have about 6 scenes with it in,
Keep seeing it.
No, but it's one of those elements where I had always wondered where they were, what it looked like. I was fine with it being left in my imagination, but I think dramatically the instinct to do that, just like the instinct to do a pre-credit sequence, was absolutely right. I think that will have brought it to life just that little bit more. Yeah, it's a great choice, and completely in keeping with the period as well. When we look back at models that were in things like the Daleks Master Plan and stuff like that, I just thought it was fantastic. And in that respect, at any rate, almost as splendid, in fact, as Gary's hat. Every time I look at your hat, Gary, I notice another little detail on it. It really is spectacular. Let's have a closer look. Look at this. Look at the colorization. Look at the attention to detail on that. I don't know. That's absolutely fabulous.
Hey, I've already got the milk and cookies out there, for tomorrow night waiting. So.
Good man. The scenes in the TARDIS also were crisp and beautiful, even more so than the last time, as were the costumes there too. It's obviously we were only a year away from proper colour, and when we look at some of the episodes that survived from 1970 onwards, those first couple of seasons, some of them have colour material in them, technically sort of colour material, recovered colour material, that doesn't really look. In fact, some of it looks worse than this.
Yeah, definitely. Like, Ambassador to Death.
Yeah. So heaven knows how that's going to look when we're getting season 7 soon, aren't we?
Yeah.
We are.
Beautiful stuff. Well, I think we've sort of exercised a little of this here together. It could be time to head over to the live chat and see what people who are listening to us there so patiently on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook and X have got to say about it too. What's your experience been like this evening with the War Games in colour on BBC4 and iPlayer? Let's find out.
This is the Type 40 podcast. You will be exterminated.
Yeah, so obviously it originally aired in 1969. The War Games marked the end of an era for the Second Doctor, following him and his companions Zoe and Jamie as they land in a battlefield that appears to be the First World War, but all is not as it seems. They soon discover that soldiers from different historical periods have been abducted and are being manipulated in a cruel game. And as they work to uncover the mystery behind the Warlord and his twisted experiments, the Doctor faces one of his most difficult of challenges. Yeah, it's pretty nasty, but try fielding comments from the live chat here on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and X, and see how you get on with that. Let's scroll back and see what people have got to say. Thank you, everybody who's joined us tonight for this special late night edition of Type 40 Live. When I say late night, it's not going to get too saucy, but but some of the language may get fruity. I mean, if John's been on the grog, so heaven knows you may strip to the waist.
Wild.
He's doing it now.
It's going to be carry on 40s very soon, isn't it?
Absolutely fantastic, everybody. Okay, so let's get some comments in from our friends there. Wow, and there's a lot. People couldn't wait to get started, it seems. Okay, and has it jammed on me? No, it hasn't. Come on, don't jam on me now. For heaven's sake. Okay, Yes, it has jammed. Just give me a second.
Just add a shot of the war chief or something like that.
Yeah, I'm just going to give the hamster a slap. Okay, where are we? Yeah, we've got lots of hellos, all that kind of thing. And we have, evening peeps there from the Geeks Handbag. Good to have you back. Merry Christmas, Adam. Happy to have you here. Don't get me started, said Ian Scales. Oh, that's... That's somewhat worrisome, isn't it? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And evening all from Simon, Ashley. We'll get to what we can, everybody. So first of all, friend of the show here and proper broadcaster, Nigel David. Merry Christmas, Nigel. He says, evening all. Well, I loved it, apart from one small bit, and that was the choices of the faces change. I was going to come to that later on.
Yeah,
but
I was waiting for us to talk about that one.
Yep.
So later on, they the Time Lords show the Doctor the faces, don't they, that he could potentially choose from. And before we got some beautiful sort of sketches, didn't we, of various types of people. The fandom, when this was announced as happening, the War Games in colour, they joked about this very thing, and we laughed about it on this show.
I didn't.
But they did. They put up not just Peter Capaldi and Jodie bloody Whittaker on screen, for fuck's sake. But we got several new incarnations of the Doctor in publicity pictures that we've all seen 101 times. A massive mistake, and it really did take me out of it. And I'm just grateful that the only thing that snapped me out of this happened so late in the entire thing, because it was a major misstep, that. And
do you know what, Dan? Do you know what? Talking on that very subject, what really annoys me about that is the fact that it's almost what they're doing, in my opinion, is that they're going, right, we want to make Classic Who look like New Who, not respect Classic Who. And then when you see shots like that, why couldn't you have seen an image of the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker? Or why couldn't you have seen Davison? It's all New. Good question. And again, like you, it took me out of it as soon as I saw that flipping Jodie Whittaker face.
Could have been for the casuals. It could have been for the casuals.
Rolled across the floor past the cat.
Anytime that woman is anywhere near this brand again, this IP, it just tunes me out. She was never the Doctor in the first place. The colorization was the only mildly positive thing about this mess, says Awesome 55. So that's, I'll put them down as a maybe. Peter Harrington says it's been severed up. Or served up and butchered. So it didn't work for Peter either. It didn't work for Super John. It was an utter disaster, according to Super John there. But Chris Chatfield, hi Chris, he says the choices of the faces changes was comedy gold. So he took it as amusing. Are we supposed to be laughing at it, do you think, Anthony?
Well, we kind of guessed, Dan, didn't we, that it was going to come up. So I was kind of ready for it. So as soon as we went to faces, I thought, well, we're going to reference more recent Doctors. So it wasn't a surprise. It didn't necessarily.
I feel very naive that I really didn't think they'd do it.
Oh, I thought they would, and it was, so when she appeared and when they appeared, it was kind of like, well, I kind of felt that was going to happen, so we kind of moved on quite quickly. But yeah, it was I don't know. I think the we'll probably come on to the regeneration, I'm sure, but I think the regeneration that when we move into the TARDIS, I thought was quite nice, but for different reasons.
About the faces really quick. I'm kind of with John because I'm thinking when he says, "Oh, that one's too young." That could have easily been a Davison picture. I actually thought if they're going to do that, and if they're going to focus just on New Who for the faces scene, what is it? They have Capaldi is too old, Tennant is too thin. What I thought they should have done is transpose the last two. It should have been Matt Smith saying, "Oh, he's too young," and then Jodie should have been the one where Troughton says, "Oh, that won't do at all."
Exactly.
Echoing what all the rest of us think. I thought that scene will work. Just flip Matt Smith and Jodie Whittaker, and that kind of works for me.
I think for me, if got a point where the faces actually spoke and Jodie said, "The blossom is blossom," I don't think anyone would ever see.
Awesome50 actually stopped watching after an hour because he couldn't take any more. So sorry to hear you had a bad experience there. Don't let it spoil your Christmas, though, of course. Simon Ashley says, I very much enjoyed the War Games in Colour, especially the regeneration scene at the end. And John is still here. Super John in the live chat is still letting leash. Lady of Troughton, hiya Lady of Troughton, that's a new name, says the first half an hour was a whirlwind and the score over the dialogue was so distracting. The colour was much better than the Daleks, though, so that was nice. So that's a pretty even balance there from Lady of Troughton, Anthony, which is, I think, was kind of where you were with it.
Yeah. I was going to add as well that the original source material for the War Games is so much better, isn't it? So that black and white recording is much better. So it was always going to look better in color, and it did look fantastic in color. The Daleks is just slightly let down by the original source material, isn't it? That you're trying to colorize, a black and white image that isn't as good as the War Games image. I was going to jump in about the colorization, Dan, if I might.
Of course.
It was really nice to see Troughton's shirt blue in the War Games, and it made a really nice bridge in my mind between the last time you see Troughton in the War Games to the next time you see him in Who, which is the Three Doctors. And and him being that same kind of blue shirt kind of made a connection for me that actually, if you think about black and white War Games and color Three Doctors, it feels like decades apart, but actually the colorized War Games, because of that shirt, brings those stories closer together. And I think there's that. It's I think that helps. I think it doesn't feel quite as a long time ago.
They looked especially cool and crisp in these early scenes in the minefield area. I thought. I mean, this looked. I wouldn't say like it had been filmed yesterday, but it's certainly compared with footage from, say, around the Tom Baker period. Yeah, it could pass for that. And these were images that were shared on social media by Rich Tibble and Ben Cook, and so this is what we got on screen in the War Games in colour, but we're able to track back, and this is before it was colorized there, because they were working off new negatives, if you remember, John. So some new stock was used in the creation of these, and this is how it had looked before. So this would have been what we had on VHS sort of way back. So it's quite a journey that this material's come on the way to this evening, isn't it? A 55-year journey now, John. 55 years.
Blimey, it's like a faithful friend to me, though. Over the years, it's one of those. Whatever moment I'm going through in life, I can put it on. I can just drift away with the War Games. It's just turn the phone off, get into it. I'm happy.
First time I ever saw it, John, when I look back, it seemed old then in 1990 when it came out on VHS, but this was nearly 35 years ago. So it wasn't really, at the time, it wasn't that old at all. Maybe it's just me that's now the old timer as well. I don't know. Thank you for all the comments, everybody.
Can I just give a quick shout out to, because I remember, Dan, on Doctor Who Day, we had some members of the colorization team in the chat.
We did.
It was really great. And I just wanted to give a shout out. I thought the scene with the charging Romans, that was a magnificent colorization of that scene, where you have the Romans on the chariots and everything coming. I was really struck by how great that scene was.
Because moments like that, because it's the gold and the red, isn't it? And it's so anachronistic, John, next to the green, the green embankment. Stuff like that can snap you out of it, but it didn't, did it?
Again, it's superb. And I always, when I first saw the trailer and I watched it in here, I really love when you look at the detail of the vehicle, when they're in the truck. I noticed it's not just got the color, it's got a really lovely shine to it as well. So again, they're geniuses, aren't they? It's great.
Paul Toastland's in the live chat as well, watching on YouTube, and says, my main gripe is the music, going back to the same model shot and changing those faces. And we've got Lee Patton as well, who's joined us and says, I've just come home from the pub. All I need to know is the regeneration from Troughton to Pertwee. They did say this. Russell T Davies said this day one. Several people involved said this day one. I suppose I understand why some of us didn't believe him, but if you've spent the last 4 weeks worrying about that, we did tell you not to. Patrick Troughton was an excellent doctor, says Stephen Braddock. Of course he was. Let's move on and chat to Boomer. Doug, my favourite story. I look forward to your opinions. It won't screen here in Australia, so he's going to be getting the Blu-ray, assuming there'll be one. We'll come to that later on too.
What does that mean? It won't screen in Australia.
It's got no broadcast deal, so they can't show it there. They can't air it there. Just like it can't go on Disney Plus in the States. It hasn't got a home in Australia anymore, and such as the ABC. Yes, I do feel for you, Doug. Yeah, I hope you get sorted out with that sooner or later. Marsh is in the live chat and says, good evening, fellow Who fans. I had the pleasure of meeting Patrick Troughton twice, once at Longleat in 83 and Birmingham in 86. Oh, what a precious memory. Precious memory. Dalek Lives Matter has not seen the original. Was this the original music track? It was enhanced, so a great deal of it was, but there were new themes sort of played into it and out of it, weren't there, Gary? It was, again, it was similar to what they'd done before, but it was just slightly more successful, a bit more sensitive and more appropriate, in my opinion.
Yeah, during like the quote-unquote action scenes, where they pump up the, trying to escape or all of that, they pump up the volume.
Pump it up, pump it up. The cliffhangers make it, says Super John. Oh, yeah, in the original 10-part version. Yes, of course they do. Ian Scale says War Games initially works because of its length and padding. The new version should be apostasy. But I don't know what that means. I'll have to go and look that up later on. Thank you for expanding my mind. A Christmas present. The Gift of Language from Ian Scales, written under pressure by two geniuses. Let's skip forward a little. Nigel Walker. Hi, Nigel says they edited out too much and some bits didn't make sense. This could have been much better with some of the scenes left in. I mean, do you think, I did wonder as I was watching this, had I had my fill at 90 minutes, because of the pace of this particular version, had I had enough at 90 minutes, or could I have stood another 10, another 15? And if I could, maybe the punters, maybe the general public could too. I don't know. My instinct is that it was probably about right, but maybe another 5 minutes wouldn't have killed it.
Yeah, I got to the point, Dan, probably 40 minutes in, where I was like, it had kind of taken me out of the story, but I was watching because I was fascinated about the colorization. So I was watching each scene and I was like, oh, this is incredible. So yeah, there were bits that just, for me, I was like, no, it's fine. I've got the black and white one. I'll stick with that one. I'm quite happy.
Dan, who makes the decision like upstream that something like the Daleks would be 75 minutes and something like this would be 90?
I have no idea. I'd wondered about that as well, that difference of 15 minutes. Maybe there was slightly more in the kitty. Maybe there was a slightly bigger budget for this. I don't know. I'd love to speak to the people involved to find out. I don't even know who commissions these. Is it commissioned by BBC4 or commissioned by Bad Wolf and then shopped to whichever platform suits it best? Would it survive, for example, Anthony, on iPlayer with not screened at all on any channel? I'm not sure.
Well, it was interesting though, Dan, when it started, when it went out on BBC4 Tonight, it started with the Hooniverse logo and putting that branding back into it. Whereas when you go into iPlayer, I think we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, when you go into iPlayer, that Hooniverse branding, that kind of folder for all things Doctor Who, you can't really find. So I was quite intrigued why they chose to start with that, because it seemed so relevant last year, but less relevant now.
Yeah, we were speculating about that, weren't we? That maybe they'd lost a little bit of faith, or it was becoming a little bit conspicuous for them because they've not done a great deal with it.
Yeah,
I was going to say also, Dan, I think you're right where you were saying that this isn't made for the general audience, and this is why I'm surprised with some of the edits and some of the additions they put into it. Because if it was for the general audience, it wouldn't have been a BBC4 broadcast, would it? It would have been on a BBC One broadcast. if
I'm not
it was
sure.
to attract the general viewers. They wouldn't have,
because a lot of general viewers watch stuff like the old Top of the Pops on there. So I'm not really sure who BBC4 is for anymore. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd be open to persuasion on either side of that, to tell you the truth. Simon Ashley, he's in the positives. He said, "What a festive treat we've had with the war games in colour. This is a lot more divided than it was last year. I'd say, generally speaking, there was a lot of people who were at odds with the Daleks in colour. It's not so much this time."
Yeah.
Dalek Lives Matter says the music editing was atrocious. Most of the scenes would have been better with no music at all.
Yes.
There were times, like, again, that conversation between the War Chief and the Doctor didn't really need any music at all, Mark. Come on.
No, not at all.
Steve Braddock says, I didn't like that the War Chief was the Master. Hated that so much. Hated that. I hated that so much content was axed. Got bored, keep seeing the model hate you. You got bored of the model shot after like 10 seconds. Come on.
We did see it a hell
Stephen.
of a lot, Dan. We did see it a hell of a lot, that HQ shot.
Maybe we did. Maybe I was just like feasting on it a little.
I do think it.
Mosh. If it says Type 40 live in massive red letters, it's live. Mosh, Merry Christmas, mate.
I do think that if they were going to do dialogue changes, maybe during the scene when you see Jodie, instead of Troughton saying, "Oh, you know, that one's too young," he could have said something like, "Just go ahead and kill me." You know, when Jodie's picture came up.
Is that what I've got in my future? No, get rid of me. Go.
Yeah, there you go.
Just watch the War Games in colour, says TARDIS Travels. Far too much music overlaid on this special, so he's not feeling the music at all, but the colour was good. The control brace looked crap. It looked like 1969. That's how it worked for me. We're being joined by Michael Q as well. Merry Christmas, Michael, and Rob Alexander too. Type 40 Live regular chatter here, and he says it's better than the Daleks. Far too many returns to the CGI establishing shot. A lot of important aspects either ignored or dropped, but he liked the regeneration sequence, barring the new Who fiery sort of effect, and he gives it a 6 out of 10 there. Again, a lot of people are going to feel. In fact, I think we've talked at length about the regeneration effects in the past, haven't we? I think we could probably come back to that at a later date and concentrate on the general thing. But thank you for the comment, Rob. Ian Scale says, I'm loyal to the original, but this was a fun version. Mostly, I think that's the healthy way to look at it, Gary. I really do. It's something a bit bouncy for Christmas. You know what?
All of us have the DVD. It's right there for us to put on all 10 episodes. I've always just looked at this as just another alternate interpretation of the story.
So you're going to be sticking with the edition of the Jodie version going forward, mate? Is that your go-to version going forward?
That's the scene where I'm going to be in the kitchen making some tea during that 2-second shot.
Mosh says, I'm going to leave before someone spoils the regeneration scene. If you don't know that John Pertwee follows Patrick Troughton by now,
it could have been a lot worse. And that was the one that I'm glad that I got wrong, because I was worried about that one.
There are several punters in the live chat who are perfectly happy with the War Chief being the Master, who are really attached to that idea, which is fair enough, I suppose. And Peter Harrington notices that David Troughton was missing completely. A bit of a shame, but I do understand the situation that they're in. The only slight criticism that Simon Ashley had of it is how much content they cut out of it. But again, we've known the runtime since they announced it. It's up to us. It is what it is how I look at it. Richard Bennett is joining us on YouTube and says, maybe it isn't the fault of the past. Maybe it's the terror of the present. I seriously skipped to the regeneration. Even 90 minutes. You couldn't even sit through 90 minutes. How would you get through 10 episodes? Skip to the regeneration. Not bad. There you go. Can't really argue with that. Merry Christmas, Richard.
It really played out kind of like what I thought it was going to be. I thought you're going to have a good portion at the beginning for the setup, and then you have to have a good chunk of the final episode. I think it was that was the only time I looked at the clock, because when the slow motion that Anthony says is one of his favorite scenes when they're escaping to the TARDIS, that's when I looked at the clock, because I wanted to see how much time they were going to give to the final episode. And it was about 15 minutes left of the show. And so I thought, okay, good, you're going to get most of the final episode, which really honestly leaves cutting down all of the running and skipping between time zones in the middle as what gets chopped. So that was kind of how I figured it was going to play out anyway.
I did like the Warlord effect again, the colors they did for that, when, you know, they're erasing the Warlord from history, you know, from time and space. That looked lovely. I really did like that.
It's very evocative, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was trying to think what is the, because obviously I wouldn't say subplots were lost. I think a choice was made to lose so much of that material going between time zones. In some respects, I feel that all that stuff that was lost is actually the soul of the original story. But what we're presented with here is something, whereas with the Daleks in colour, it was still the same story told in largely the same way. I do feel this has shifted it slightly. It's a different take, so it gives it a different feel, but I don't necessarily think that it's any the worse off for that. Now, I'm certainly going to watch this one again, probably a lot sooner than I watched the Daleks in colour again. I don't know. I'm just generally more impressed with this.
I was going to say, Dan, the kind of billing for this was the regeneration that Troughton never had, and I think that was the framing for this. It feels like, because it feels like there were about 15-20 minutes for the regeneration, and there was a setup at the beginning. This felt very much like the Doctor on trial. So you get the Doctor on trial with General Smythe right at the beginning, and then sort of like half an hour later you get him on trial again, and I felt it was a regeneration package, and I feel as though that's how this had been framed right from the outset. So I felt that I was just working towards this regeneration. And then I think it was the Doctor Who magazine that had said that a fan, it was really creative, a fan had created the regeneration scene and put it onto YouTube.
That's
between
right.
Troughton and Pertwee, and Phil Collinson had contacted him to say, could we use this material for the colorized war games? And so I went to YouTube and watched it, and actually the creation that you can see on YouTube is much longer,
far longer than
used. It was slightly cut down, but I felt that that's what we were always moving towards, and quite quickly, to put that right, almost, you know, to put the regeneration back out there.
But again, I mean, like you said, Dan, we're not going to go over it into great detail, but again, I never wanted to see that. I'm fed up with the regeneration.
I never needed it either.
Exactly. I was perfectly happy with how that regeneration happened. They've made him change his appearance, and then Pertwee falls out at the TARDIS at the end. You know, that's all fine with me. But the guy who did all of this, he's incredibly talented, and I hope he goes on to better things as well.
Another plug for my chat with Jacob Booth, aka the Confession Dial. He was my guest on Type 40 Extra last year, not long after the Second Doctor Regenerates mini episode went live on YouTube, and he told me how he made it, basically. So it's a fascinating conversation, even if I say so myself. Hit that up on the playlists here on Type 40 Extra, and further editions of that show coming since to another one dropping in a few days, come to think of it. So check that out if you want the inside info on how Jacob made that happen, and what Phil and Russell and Ben and Richard saw there that felt that they wanted to incorporate it into this new presentation. The regeneration scenes and the faces of the future Doctors really has annoyed a lot of people, just too many to keep going over and over and over it. But I appreciate all the comments. Thank you, everyone. We hear you. But it's clearly a problem. Like I say, it snapped me out of it as well. So no judgment from me at all. But obviously, we're not going to keep going back to the same comment. John Mason says, it sounds like they've ruined it. What a surprise. I don't feel this is ruined at all. No.
John, you're absolutely right about the regeneration as it stands in the black and white version, because Troughton's spinning around and and going out there and going to Earth, and you don't know who that's going to be and what he looks like. Is there something quite exciting about that? And remember,
I agree.
In Doctor Who history terms, I think the War Games originally went out, I don't know, I'm going to guess, April, somebody will put me right in the chat, April to June 69.
I think it was around that time.
Yeah. So it takes a long time, doesn't it, to see Pertwee in Spearhead from Space in the January of the following year. So you're going for a 6-month holiday, and it is the longest holiday that the program has
the
seen.
classic show ever had.
Do you know what? Do you know what? Do you know what I like about it?
I don't even think Pertwee was cast when this was filmed, right?
That's right.
I don't think he was, or he wasn't.
No, he hadn't been cast. They didn't cast him until about 3 weeks after episode 10 of the War Games was shown.
And I think what I like about the original regeneration in the War Games, what I like and what I was talking about a few minutes ago, and you're right, Anthony, because as a kid loving Doctor Who, what I always loved was the excitement of the regeneration, and it was always a little bit different each time.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's the same all the time, and it's lost that special feeling, that I have when I see a regeneration.
Well, in my head canon as well, I'd reasoned it that the reason why it looks the same now is because after the 8th Doctor takes the elixir from the Sisterhood of Khan, then it changes the nature of regeneration because the process has been interfered with by the flame, and that's why. But then going back and doing this to earlier regenerations ruins my head canon, Russell.
Yeah, it does. It does.
But also, I don't think it makes. I do think it I think it takes something away, just as you've said, the uniqueness of what was achieved by the special effects people on those original episodes and the imaginations of everybody that made those happen on screen. I'd rather see new versions of those than reworkings in the modern way.
But also, remember, Dan, the program was, its life expectancy was growing a little bit shorter in 1969, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there was that
touch and go
possibility that it may or may not come back. They went back for season 7. They had another turn, didn't they? And it was hugely successful. It was great. But had they finished the program then, it would have been a really interesting and curious program, wouldn't it? That started.
I suppose it would.
Well, and you know, when it came back for season 7, that was really the make it or break it season. If the ratings for season 7 with this new Doctor had not been what they wanted it to be, that would have, at the end of season 7, would have been it.
That would have been that. That would have been that. TARDIS Travels feels these specials are too self-indulgent by the people who are making them. Have you seen both of them? I can't agree. I mean, I do wonder about the conceit of attempting it in the first place.
Yeah.
But I think there were a couple in, and I do wonder who they're for. I think TARDIS Travels mentioned that as well. Who is this for? And we've circled that a little bit on this conversation. I think we talked about it on the regular shows too. And I do still wonder who they're aiming this at, how it's marketed. But for now, I think it's going in an interesting direction. And if the evolution continues, then I don't know. We may end up looking forward to these. I don't know how long they intend on making this. We'll come to that later.
Quickly, I just wanted to say that I keep thinking about what Anthony was talking about at the beginning about the fact that this started off with the Hooniverse logo, as you said, Anthony, at the beginning. And I'm thinking now, all of the new additions in this really seem aimed to people who are only familiar with the new show, with the Gallifrey looking like the new version, only the new Doctors in the choice scene. But yet, it's part of the Hooniverse, which is where you go to see the entire history of the show. So as John said, why couldn't we have had Davison or Colin as part of that choice?
Yeah.
Because if this is being offered as part of the Hooniverse, then presumably the viewers of this will be familiar with everything.
You're right, Gary. And I think for me, whether they think this way or not, I think it's a perception that they've got. It's a perception that comes across of we're a bit embarrassed about the classic series, so we've got to make it look like the new Who era, from 2005 onwards. And to be honest with you, I think when you look back, and we'll look back in a few years' time, I think the original classic series stands
That does tend to
Proudly.
happen.
Yeah, it stands proudly, doesn't it?
I was about to disagree with you because I think that some of it is done because I think, well, look, we're going to have to do something with this anyway because it's being shown in HD. But but you are right. More often than not, a lot of the stuff that is created in the here and now for reasons, sometimes perfectly noble or practical or reasonable reasons, does end up aging far, far worse than original material in movies and TV. More often than not.
You're right, Dan, because you look at stories and you might say, oh, well, the effects are dated, or, you know, the way it was filmed is dated. But you could go into a classic Doctor Who story and there's nothing particularly from that period that is discussed like on the nose, whereas now it is. And I think that will last to the end of days, you know, because of how great the classic era is. But just give me more Troughton, you know, someone do it right.
more Troughton. Kick out the jams, says Lee Smith. The music at the farewell scenes kind of ruined it. It worked better without. Total vandalism, says Joshua. Never mind, Joshua. Merry Christmas. Beep the Meep says the first 3 episodes were excellent, but it did seem to lose its way in the middle a bit with the jump cuts. I kept looking at the clock to see much of the last episode we were going to get, which is, that's what you said. You mentioned that. Way too much music again, says Adam. Every scene didn't need to be scored. It was relentless. No, I do agree. Definitely agree with that.
It wasn't as relentless as the Daleks. I think the Daleks is really loud.
No, and I think, guys, I don't know what you think, but you know, when we're talking about the subject about, you know, the music that they put in for the soundtrack for these, the great thing about the classic series is you don't have that, and it almost allows the characterization to breathe, you know, which is really good. So when you're having all that music on, you don't always need to put music into these stories. Just let Troughton do what he does best, you know, let the other characters do what they do best, you know, by the actors that are playing those characters.
Do you remember in the 90s when they first released Shada onto VHS?
Yeah.
They got Kev McCulloch to do the score over the top of it. And it was it was so incongruous, wasn't it?
I had forgotten.
It was so loud and so... you know, blocking the original dialogue. Just let Tom and Lala shine. You don't need this noise behind them. I remember having the same jarring feeling. Maybe it's because I'm so familiar with the source material that anything that comes crashing into it is going to disappoint, I guess.
Yeah, that takes us back full circle to this scene and this moment and Windmill in 1985, Anthony, where I first saw this as well. And one of the things that freaked me out about, and this was all I saw of the War Games for 5 years, in between Windmill and the VHS coming out.
Yeah.
And this entire scene was, I'm not scary, but it was disturbing, I think. And it was partly because of the way that it was all warped and the voices were warped. It's a force field, like that. Whereas in this, you'd still got that, but you've got music over the top of it as well. Far, far more music that kind of... I think, well, I suppose this is the problem with this writ large, isn't it, really, down to a tiny moment. It's because I know that so well. I think, oh no, don't spoil it. Maybe there are some people... because results are going to vary, who the experience that I had with this scene, thinking, oh, don't spoil this scene, because this scene is really special to me. Maybe some people just feel that way about the entire thing.
I may be overgeneralizing it, and I know that this doesn't apply to every creator of film and television these days. I just think for the most part, modern day creators of film and television aren't comfortable with silences. In their product.
That's true.
They want to have either music there because they think the audience always needs something to listen to, or they want the music to signal how the audience is supposed to feel about what they're seeing in that scene. But they're not, they're just not comfortable with allowing the silence to be as much part of the storytelling as the music is. And that's really sad.
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Because obviously music is an integral part to Doctor Who, and it's right that it be looked again when everything else is being looked again. I understand why they're doing it, but somehow I do think that they're getting it slightly wrong. And obviously Marquez has been involved in this brand for a very long time. He's a massive Doctor Who fan. Nobody's more conscientious. Nobody cares more. And I'd say that there can't be anybody who knows the original material better than he does. There's no accounting for taste and all that. I don't know. I think maybe I'm just going to have this problem as long as these precise individuals are involved. But I do think there was a progress here. I do think that this was a more refined production. Everything working with a little bit more synergy that didn't snap me out of it. But clearly results, it's got varying results. Generally speaking, look in the live chat, this is nowhere near the drawn daggers of just over a year ago. But the things that have wound people up really have wound people up, which is kind of part of being a Doctor Who fan. Sort of comes with the territory. But far fewer toys being thrown out of the pram.
The thing is, these production people, Dan, this is me on my soapbox now. They will not learn the fact, they will not let it lie, the fact that Jodie Whittaker is one of the most unpopular decisions in not just Doctor Who, but in modern sci-fi or in history of sci-fi. And I didn't go further than that. I'd say in 21st century entertainment and popular culture, generally speaking. And they won't let it lie. It was unnecessary to have her in there. It was unnecessary to have Capaldi and Tennant and Matt Smith there.
Yeah, I didn't want to see any of them, but when that woman showed up, I thought, boom, out. I was gone.
When that scene showed up, I was willing the Daleks to turn up and wipe out Gallifrey. To be honest with you, that's where I was at that point.
I can say I'm trying not to labour the point because there are a lot of comments in the live chat, so I know that we were far from alone. But we do try not to sort of climb into the hole too much here at Type 40 Live and indulge that. But I think we're allowed to rant, not only because it's quite late, but it's Christmas. It's Christmas. Time for a quick break, I think, and we're going to round things off with the answers to a few questions, or at least the answers that we've presently got. So stick with us, and we'll be back in a moment.
This is Philip Roy playing the Doctor.
And I'm Mandy Rose, and I play Jenny.
For the Doctor Who fan film, Doctor Who Meets the Scorpion, this is the Type 40 podcast.
Yes, so with the interference on the screen there, it's clouding the fact that we're actually getting a bit of a festival of Doctor Who over the next few days from the BBC there with the Northern Lights and the TARDIS that nobody can get into because it's not got a handle on the door. God. But the War Games in colour is just the first shot of a set of programming that we're going to get over the next few days. It continues on Christmas Eve in the afternoon at 4 p.m. in the afternoon on BBC Two with the Doctor Who prom that you were there for the recording of, weren't you, Anthony? So you're looking forward to seeing that again in the comfort of your own home?
Yeah, I mean, you say Christmas Eve. Today. It's on this evening, this afternoon. Yes.
My God. Yes, unsurprisingly, we're overrunning. There we go. Who'd have thought it? Obviously, Christmas Day itself, Joy to the World, the 2024 Doctor Who Christmas special, that's on at 5:10, shortly followed by another edition of Doctor Who Unleashed there with Stephen Powell and Shooter Gatwa hanging off the jukebox there. So that's what's to come in the next few days. Is any of it going to be any good? Well, we'll find out together as always, won't we? Doctor Who is, I wouldn't say it's the jewel in the crown, but it's been supported there by Strictly Come Dancing and a brand new Wallace and Gromit movie that the whole nation is quite frankly looking forward to. So I think it stands a pretty good chance this year, and you'll be able to catch up with it all on BBC iPlayer for, I think, indefinitely in some cases. Not sure about the War Games. That could have a cap on it of about a year, because I know that the Daleks vanished, didn't it? Surprisingly vanished, as a lot of people found. It's been confirmed that the War Games in colour is coming to disc. So people are asking in the live chat, people like Doug are asking, the release date of this is to be confirmed, but it is coming. It's been announced today. So it's coming on DVD, on Blu-ray, and a steelbook. So the DVD will be £14.99, the Blu-ray £19.99, and the steelbook is listed as $29.99. The release will not only include the War Games in colour that we've had this evening on BBC4, but the original 10 episodes in full, in black and white, as originally broadcast, plus all the special features from that original DVD release. Back in, when did this come out on DVD? I can't quite remember. But yeah, a standout release in a fabulous range. So everything from that is being ported over into the new one. I can't wait to see the new artwork. And obviously it's going to look better than ever because it'll be in HD ahead of any potential Season 6 box set, which is going to wind some people up to all hell, John.
Yeah, it is.
Are you going to pre-order this, John? Do you think you'll pull the trigger? You're the guy who's enjoyed it the least, so will you order it anyway?
The collector in me says yes, just so I can burn it on a bonfire. But
is that bad?
No, I think, you know, I don't know yet. I really don't. I did get the Daleks one last year, and I've not watched it since. So I may pull the trigger on it, but you know, I know in my heart of hearts, I'm always going to go back to the original version.
Yeah.
There you go. I've said my bit.
Dan, I'm going to throw you into an existential crisis with this next.
Oh no! What,
so
it's
are you aware, Dan, that if you buy any one of those, that you, Dan Hadley, will actually be purchasing a Jodie Whittaker disc now? Are you going to be able to live? Are you going to be able to live with yourself if you do that?
He doesn't. He doesn't. Dan doesn't know what he's got for Christmas from his kids yet.
Are you watching? Are you watching, kids? Don't do it. Don't do it. Remember, it's cooking your dinner.
There you go.
Oh God, Gary, what a conundrum.
There you go. We have 3 months to figure it out.
I haven't pre-ordered. Not yet. Not yet. So people have been asking.
Maybe it's not too late. Maybe we can start a petition for them to cut that little Jodie Whittaker clip out before they press the disc.
Well,
we can always snip it out ourselves.
I was going to say, I'm going to do what they've been doing with Classic. I'm going to go into the Jodie era and start adding in classic Doctors to replace.
Oh, you know what? Before we go, can I just really quickly? We haven't talked about this. The clip that is early. I don't know, where was it when he says? I think it was in the Evils in the Universe That Must Be Fought, where we see the full color Yeti. We see the full
beautiful.
Color
people have mentioned that in the live chat. Yeah,
the Cyberman. I was just in absolute heaven. That quick shot of the Daleks, where we see the colorized Ben and Polly, you know, and from the power of the Daleks. I was in heaven.
I think we did see some of that last year at the end of the Daleks in color. But there were definitely new sequences too, longer sequences, which my eyes were out on stalks. But it's the same when the Doctor was going through that list of villains that he'd fought, Anthony, and he mentions the Cybermen and the Daleks. So to see that sequence from the invasion in colour and then the Daleks.
Yeah, it's a really nice bit. And actually the regeneration where Troughton is sat in the chair and he's sort of hearing voices of previous companions, I also thought was a nice touch. I hope that's not spoiling it for anybody.
Yeah, you hear Victoria.
Yeah, it was a nice touch that. I was going to speculate, Dan. You said a moment ago, where are these specials going to go to? Where are they going to keep going over Christmas? And it came to my head, why don't they go and take a story like a two-parter, like the Sontaran experiment, turn it into black and white and make it 10 episodes long and show it on BBC4? How about that for an idea?
Yeah, give us more.
More of a
less
story and put it into black and white.
Yeah, I support.
I don't think that's an unreasonable. I don't think that's an unreasonable question. Yeah, because as much as I've, no, but the irony of it.
10-parter.
No, I mean sort of to extend things, to say, okay, to get footage that was cut, put that into something that was originally 50 minutes. You know, footage that Ian Levine saved or retained. Do something with that and put a special edition out in the same way that Silver Nemesis was done on VHS, but ideally with something a lot better than that. So the principle of it, I actually agree with. I think to go back to special editions that have more in rather than less might not be a bad idea, or maybe both could be a way forward. I don't know. I mean, this meme was in circulation a little while ago, which did make me laugh. You do wonder. You do wonder. It's not an unreasonable question to ask, to float out there, is it? But I have to say, you have to judge these things on the night, and for the most part, I did really enjoy what we've been served this evening. I don't think it's any slight on classic Doctor Who, on the Troughton Doctor, on everybody who made those episodes happen way back in the day. But I'm very interested to know what you've all got to say about that. So please let us know in the comments section. We want to hear some more. Thank you, everybody, for all of the comments. The DVD, the Blu-ray, and the Steelbook are on the way. If you want to hear more from me with Jacob Booth there, hit up that episode of Type 40 Extra. Jacob's got his own YouTube channel as well. If you want to go and watch the Second Doctor Regenerates in full, that is there on the Confession Dial channel as well. And if you've watched the War Games in colour, if this is the first time you've seen the War Games this evening, you could be interested to learn that the Spearhead from Space, the story that directly follows it, is up presently on the Doctor Who Classic channel. This is an official channel from the BBC. In the last few weeks, they've not only reopened this channel because it was dormant for years, they've given it new livery, and they've loaded it up with some classic Doctor Who serials in full, for free. They're on YouTube for you to stream, to watch when you're nodding off or doing the washing up or whatever else. The Spearhead from Space is one of them, so you can see the story continue, and it pick up with the third Doctor there as he springs. Where is he? Yes, springs into action. Yes. Okay, so thank you guys for your company for this one. It's got Christmas off to a sort of flying start. I mean, John, was this about what you were expecting, or was it better? Was it worse? Because you were a little reluctant.
Yeah, the only thing I liked about it was the colorization, but I'm not extremely disappointed because I was prepared for what I was going to get, and pretty much everything I thought I would get happened. The only thing that didn't happen was when I said weeks ago, I thought they might try and insert the Roof Doctor. But I'm glad that, I was prepared. I was waiting for it to happen. It happened. So I didn't have a nasty shock this time round. But, they'll keep trying. They'll keep trying to squeeze things in that will shock me, but not anymore. I'm prepared. The shields are up.
If you could, because we've had people giving this scores in the live chat there, could you give this a score out of 10, but specifically for the War Games in colour? Is it possible?
I would say I'd probably give it a 5, but I will say on a separate thing, I'd probably, but for the colorization, I'd give that a 10. Because the colorization for me, that's the only reason. That was the only reason I was watching it up to a certain point, because I just thought these people are geniuses. I never in my lifetime thought I'd see this. I remember, early 90s, like you, when they were talking about recolorizing VHS versions, and how it looked then. But to be at a stage where we are now, where you're seeing this level of quality, I mean, that's great. I want to see more of it. But again, I'm selfish. I want to see the entire story as originally broadcast, colorized, which costs a lot more money, but that's what I want.
Thank you for your contributions and your comments, John. Always fabulous to get your insight.
Thanks.
I doubt that I will forget where I was on December the 23rd, 2024, Gary, what I was watching. I think they've marketed this really, really well. Considering that last time was part of the 60th anniversary, I think this has really stood out this time. I think I'm going to find it memorable. How about you? And can you attach a score to this out of 10?
I'm going to give this a solid 8. Like I said, I thought I was captivated throughout. I knew that they'd have to truncate some stuff, but I thought there was a lot of thought that went behind what they kept and what they cut. As John said, the colorization was magnificent. The performances, obviously, after all these decades, are still incredible. So I had a great time watching it. It was pretty much exactly what I thought it was going to be. When I was reassured by the announcer, the BBC4 announcer right before it started, that we were going to see the regeneration from Troughton into Pertwee and nobody else, I calmed down, and I was able to relax and just kind of enjoy the next 90 minutes because I realized that I wasn't about to be traumatized. So I just I was overall, very pleased.
Good stuff. Yeah, it's a pretty high mark there from Gary. How about you, Anthony? I mean, were you dreading this? Was it one of those, well, in for a penny, in for a pound? Hadley's asked me now. I suppose I'd better talk about it. I mean, were you pleasantly surprised? And can you possibly score this out of 10? Or is it a moot point?
I've had time to think while the other guys were talking. So, I mean, I've always loved the war games. I have the black and white version of the war games, and nobody can touch that, so that's good. So therefore, I went to this color one thinking, well, the world's probably better with it than without it because the colorization is superb. The war games in color would, if they completed it like John was saying, all 10 episodes would be 10 out of 10. They've edited this down, which we always knew was going to be problematic in terms of the narrative, so that loses a mark, so we're down to 9 out of 10. Then the music is just too loud in some places, which spoils the kind of the characterization and the characters in this, so that takes another point away, so we're down to 8. I want to go down to 7, but I can't find anything else to take it down to 7 too.
I can help.
I loved, the regeneration with all the voices is great. The monsters, you get a bit more of that, is great. I went into this trying to, I've got a 7. I went into this trying to have a story told, and the story of the war games wasn't quite told, so I'm going to go for 7 out of 10 for all of the reasons.
Thank you, Anthony. Fabulous stuff. And thanks for staying up. Where am I going to go with this? This is one of those questions I ask other people. Then when it comes around to my turn, I think, oh God, I suppose I better come up with something now as well. I'm struggling with this too. For the most part, I agree with what you've said. I was tempted. I did enjoy this a lot. I think there was very little actually wrong with it. But the things that were wrong with it, unfortunate and very, very minor. It's kind of like getting not so much a nail in your tire as a drawing pin. But I can't bring myself to give it any more than an 8.5. I feel I should push it up to a half because it's Christmas. But I have all the problems that you described there, Gary. But I think I'm just willing to nudge it up just that little bit more because some of the things that snapped other people out of it didn't for me. And I did get swept away in this. And even though the War Games is a favourite story of mine, I think this was tremendously successful. And just a new version of a story. It's not lessened the original for me in any way. And where will they go next? Which stories will they go with next? Because there are going to be more of these, we're reliably informed. I wouldn't like to say. I would have never have thought, in all sincerity, I don't know whether it was actually wise for them to have tackled the War Games, it being so long. For me, it's a bit like trying to do a marathon after you've done the sort of
should have been Tomb of the Cybermen
couch to 2K or something. It's you could have made it easier for yourselves. Would be my takeaway from this. But having said that, I think it was pretty successful considering how badly this could have easily have face planted, and I personally feel that it didn't, so I'm happy to give it an 8.5. But what did you think, everybody? Let us know in the comments. We've had lots of comments, people staying up with us, people in the UK or people overseas stepping in and having their say, just like Gary has. Thank you for your company, Gary. Too, stay masterly, says Adrian Sherlock. Good advice, whether it's Christmas or not.
Or
out of 10 for Nigel.
More cheaperly, as the case may be.
Darla Clives Matter says, it wasn't worthy of Doctor Who, in my opinion. I'd rather they practice on something else. To be honest, I think we'd never get anywhere with any kind of innovation. I think it's a question of whether they should do this at all. because you've always got to start somewhere, and anything like this is always going to get better, no matter how much you do it. But there we go. And maybe the fact that this was 10 episodes is why they've done it, which is first so early, says Sticks Boy 73. I hadn't thought of that, but maybe you're right. Could be something in there.
They didn't do 10 episodes, did they? They cut a load out. So, you know.
Funny, isn't it? Well, yeah, it's stepping into classic material and augmenting it in all sorts of strange ways. You have to wonder where on earth it could end, don't you? And yes, everybody, that is a cue.
I'm totally fine with those kind of additions.
I know, it's a cheap one, everybody. It's been a long day, a long night, and it's Christmas, so
now.
why not?
That was Dan's Christmas gift to all of us, everybody.
No, I've got to go back. I've got to go back and get my Christmas gift because, just one more thing. Everybody, one more thing. It wouldn't be Type 40 Live if we didn't finish off with a little fan art. And just the one piece this time, but it is a good one. This is from David Burgess in celebration of the War Games. And I think this is a fabulous piece of digital painting there that captures so much of the appeal of the War Games, the urgency, the scale, the colour before there was colour. And this is the kind of design that I've never seen an artist take these particular elements, and use them in this particular way before. Because I've always liked those kind of little webcam things that are in the Time Lord's courtroom. Yeah. So I really love this there from David Burgess, a fantastic artist.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? I would be quite happy if this was in the 90s when I was making my own VHS covers for all my Doctor Who recordings.
Oh, you did that as well.
This slapped on the front, yeah.
And I don't know if this was intentional from David. I love the fact that you have the TARDIS on its side falling toward Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Acknowledge the ending of it.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Very stylish, says Lee Smith there in the live chat. Now that floats my boat, says Peter Harrington. Gorgeous, says Crimpling Doubloon. Someone was watching some kind of anime there, says the Peter Venkman fanside. I think that's in relation to the video, isn't it? Yeah. What else is there? Everyone have a nice night, says the Timescales. Thank you. Yes, so I love this. David, apparently, he's gone to work for BBC Studios now. I think he's working on Doctor Who material as well, and very thoroughly deserved, I feel. But yeah, we love the fan art here at Type 40 Live, and we're always in search of more of it to get up on the view screen here, mainly because these are bloody big, very empty walls here in the current TARDIS. They need to be filled up with colour. Or with talent, with sheer raw talent, and with takes on Doctor Who moments and characters that we all love, whether it's in colour or black and white. I said one piece. Let's have another piece. This is a fabulous piece of Doctor Who artwork.
From
great.
Now this one comes from Eldrad Must Live on Instagram, and it's a beautiful picture, sepia picture of Ian and Barbara having a bit of a cuddle. I'm a bit dubious about about the star, the light that's shining out of Barbara's arse. I've only just noticed that, but I love the fact that on the top somebody's written Christmas 1967 in biro. Now a lot of the pictures, my family photos, Anthony, from back in the 50s and the 60s that my granddad had taken or took, have the dates written on them in biro somewhere. It's a beautiful touch.
Dan.
Yeah, it's really nice.
That's right.
But I love Barbara and I love Jacqueline Hill. So the sun shines out of her, in a star.
There you go. A Christmas starfish.
You guys are playing it safer than I am, because I think they're Megara coming out of her from the Stones of Blood.
Oh, there you go.
Could be.
That's fantastic. What a wonderful picture.
Yeah. Beautiful Christmassy artwork there. Peter Harrington says it could be a galactic Trump. Yeah, so very dignified. I can't really crow about dignity, can I? After some of the things I put up on screen regularly on this show. So yes, more fan art to fill up these walls. Please, if you would, get in touch with us through our social media. That's Instagram and X at Type 40 Doctor Who, or you can cut out the middleman or woman by joining us in the Type 40 Facebook group. You can talk about the war games in colour that you've had on BBC4 this very night. Are you looking forward to pre-ordering it on DVD, Blu-ray, or the Steel Book? Or you can let fly with your reviews of the entire presentation, for better or for worse. It's all fine by us. These two characters have been going at it already for a couple of years. Leave them to it. Start your own conversation by all means, and we'll chip in when we can. This has been Type 40 live across your view screen on Rumble, X, YouTube, and on Facebook, all part of our Christmas coverage. We haven't dematerialized this time. Yeah, so this Type 40 live, and Type 40 extra. The more comments, the better, everybody. Thank you for all of that. Guys, I hate to say it, but we can't avoid it forever. Yes, it's all about you soon, sunshine. You'll get your turn soon. But yeah, for now, I think it's all about Christmas and family and friends and festivities and cheer. Christmas Eve, Anthony, have you got any plans for tomorrow, or has this interfered with them in any way?
I'm off on my travels from tomorrow. Well, from
very
now,
nice.
in 6 hours' time. So yeah, so lots of people to visit, lots of things to do and see. So yeah, it's going to be quite a busy one. But this is merged into Christmas Eve, so in literally 6 hours' time or 7 hours' time, I'll be up and ready to go. Fabulous.
Well, thank you for your company, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and you.
Gary, it'd be about 5. It's 5:30 p.m. for you now?
Well, about 4:30, so I still have the evening to go, but tomorrow's just going to be Christmas shows and Christmas movies and, Christmas eating and...
Very nice.
That. But thank you so much for having me on, and I hope that everyone has just a very merry and blessed Christmas.
Eat, drink, and be merry and all that. Cheers, Gary. Great to have you aboard. It's a pity there's only the 2 mince pies on this plate. I'll fight you. We can always cut them in half, can't we? It's probably the more sensible option anyway, John.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't share anyway. I'd just take the 2.
I was going to say, it's a week in the gym burning off this. Thank you again, Gary. And John, I'm so pleased you can make it, because I know you did have a few technical problems. But yeah, thanks for staying up and for enduring the war games in colour, despite your better judgment.
And if anyone's seen, I've got a cat, Poppy, behind me, and she's in that mood where she's either going to settle down or she's going to attack my face like a face hugger from Alien at any second. So if you don't see me in a few days, that
none of that.
Why.
Yeah, none of that. Bill. None of that, says Bill. Thank you, everybody who's left us some comments there in the live chat, for spending Christmas Eve with us, or at least an hour or so of it, near enough an hour of it. We really do appreciate it. We'd like to hear some more as well. Of course, there's more coming from us. We haven't dematerialized this time. Podcasts and extra videos exclusive to our YouTube and Rumble channels, and Type 40 Live too. That will be back before you know it. Know it? That's what happens when you get tired. For now, though, I think it's time to just say, we'll bid you farewell in real time. Have a terrific Christmas day, everybody. Whatever you're watching, in the here or the now, from there or then, I'd say do what makes you happy. Do what makes you merry. Yes, so whether you're going to the Time Hotel or not, Merry Christmas from all of us here at Type 40 Live, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
See ya.